Before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you're watching this late at night, let me know where you're from and what time it is where you are. That way YouTube knows you want more stories just like this, delivered straight into the dark. Now let's begin. Brandon and Melissa were halfway through their road trip from Portland to Santa Fe, a much-needed escape from their high-stress jobs and the weight of routine. They had carefully planned every leg of the journey: pit stops, motels, playlists, snacks. Everything felt under control until they took a detour through northern Nevada. It was Brandon's idea. "Highway's a crawl," he said. "Google Maps shows a faster route through this stretch here. Looks empty but shaves off an hour." Melissa was skeptical. The shortcut veered off the main highway and cut through desolate desert for miles. But time saved was time earned, so they took it. About 40 minutes in, they realized they hadn't seen another car. No gas stations, no signs, no cell signal, just endless desert, baking in late afternoon heat. Then, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, Brandon saw it. A rusted old gas station on the right side of the road. Its paint was sun-faded, signage half gone, but the lights inside were on. They pulled in. The air was unnaturally still. No wind, no crickets. Just the sound of their tires crunching gravel. Inside, the gas station looked frozen in time, like a set from the 1960s. An analog cash register, dusty candy jars, a Coca-Cola sign that still read 5C. Behind the counter stood a man. He was wearing a gas attendant's uniform, old and faded, with a stitched name tag that read Frank. He didn't blink, didn't move, just stood there with a polite smile. Melissa stayed in the car while Brandon went in. "Pump still working?" Brandon asked. Frank didn't speak, just nodded slowly. Brandon filled up the tank. The pump clicked off exactly at 10 hours, which was strange. He went back inside to pay, but when he handed over his card, Frank didn't take it. He pushed a metal coin box toward Brandon instead. "Cash only." Brandon dug through his wallet and handed over a $10 bill. Frank took it, still without blinking, and dropped it into the box. No register. No change. Then softly, Frank said, "You folks should get going. Road gets dangerous after sundown." That was the only thing he said. Brandon nodded, thanked him, and got back in the car. "Weird dude," he muttered. As they drove away, Melissa kept glancing in the side mirror. "Something's off," she said. "The guy, he never moved." They drove in silence for another hour before reconnecting with the highway and their GPS. At the next motel, Brandon casually mentioned the detour and the gas station to the clerk. The man froze. "Where exactly did you stop?" Brandon showed him the location on his phone's offline map. The clerk shook his head slowly. "There's nothing out there. That gas station's, it burned down in 1974. Family of 3 died inside. They say sometimes people still see it, but only those who shouldn't." Brandon laughed it off, but later that night, Melissa couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m., she took Brandon's hoodie out of his suitcase. When she lifted it, a single item fell out. A metal coin, old, dusty, and stamped with a gas station logo that no longer existed. And on the back of the coin was one word: return. Sarah and Jason were college sweethearts, now married and making their first real road trip together, a cross-country drive from Ohio to Oregon. They weren't in a rush, no deadlines, just the open road, shared playlists, and their aging but reliable silver Honda CR-V. On the third day, deep in the Appalachian foothills of West Virginia, GPS unexpectedly lost signal. They were used to spotty reception in rural zones, so they kept driving, trusting the highway signs. But then roadwork forced a detour. A faded orange sign pointed them toward a back road. Ember Hollow, 12 miles. "Sounds cozy," Jason joked. Sarah rolled her eyes. The paved road quickly turned to gravel, then to dirt, then to nothing but 2 tire ruts through thick trees. Forest wrapped around them like a tunnel. No reception, no other cars, just the constant crunch of dirt under tires. Then they saw the sign, "Welcome to Ember Hollow, founded 1867. Below that, a hand-carved wooden board read, "No outsiders after dark." The town itself appeared a few minutes later, a single road flanked by wooden houses, porches shaded by overgrown trees. No lights, no people, not even cars, just wind chimes that moved without wind. Something about it made Sarah shiver. Jason suggested they stop at the small general store for directions. Inside, the air smelled of oil lamps and cedar. Shelves were lined with handmade goods and dusty cans. Behind the counter sat a wrinkled old man with pale blue eyes that didn't blink much. Jason asked about getting back to the main road. The man stared at them for a moment too long. Then he said slowly, "Road'll take you back, but it only lets you leave before sunset." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked. The man didn't reply, just looked out the door. The sun was already dipping behind the hills. They got back in the car and took the only road out, a winding path that seemed steeper than before. But after 15 minutes, they passed the same "Welcome to Ember Hollow" sign again. They had looped back. Panic crept in. Jason floored it. They took another road branching left, darker, narrower. Trees pressed in. Time stretched. Then, another sign, "Ember Hollow, founded 1867. The same man stood outside the general store, watching them silently. Sarah was crying now. "We didn't turn around. How is this possible?" Jason jumped out of the car. "What is this?" he yelled. The man raised a hand. "Some places are sticky," he said. "They remember those who enter, especially the ones with doubt in their hearts." "What do you want from us?" Jason asked. The man nodded towards Sarah. "She's pregnant, isn't she?" That froze them. They hadn't told anyone yet. They had just found out the day before. Sarah instinctively clutched her stomach. "She carries light. That's why the hollow won't let go," the man whispered. "Please," Sarah begged. "We just want to go home." The man turned and went back inside, leaving the door ajar. Jason followed. Inside, the man handed him a map, old, hand-drawn, with trails marked in red ink. "Take the path through the old orchard. Don't stop, don't look back, don't speak." Jason and Sarah followed the route in silence. The orchard was dead, twisted trees like skeletal hands reaching across the trail. At one point they heard whispers in the wind, their names being called. Sarah almost turned around, but Jason held her hand tight. When they finally emerged back onto the highway, the sky was pitch black, but stars were visible again. They never saw Ember Hollow on any map again. 2 weeks later, at her first ultrasound appointment, the nurse paused, eyes wide. "There's something unusual," she said. "What is it?" Sarah asked, heart racing. The nurse turned the screen toward them. The baby was fine, but next to it, a tiny shadow like a second figure that slowly faded as they watched. Trevor had always liked to drive at night. Something about the open road, the quiet, the rhythmic hum of tires. It cleared his mind. He was heading back from a business trip in Boise, Idaho, planning to stop at a roadside motel before reaching his hometown in Oregon. It was close to 1 a.m. when he turned onto a stretch of highway that cut through a remote valley surrounded by thick pine forest. The road was almost pitch black except for the car's headlights. No other vehicles, no cell signal, just an unbroken line of asphalt ahead. As he rounded a bend, he saw something ahead, a figure on an overpass. A woman. She stood in the center of the narrow bridge above, wearing a pale dress that fluttered slightly in the wind. Her long black hair hung down over her face, unmoving. She wasn't waving or running, just standing there, staring down. Trevor's stomach turned. He slowed as he passed beneath the overpass, glancing up through the windshield. The woman didn't move. Her head turned slightly as he passed, following him. Chalk it up to sleep deprivation, he told himself. A weird local statue, or someone playing a prank. Still, he couldn't shake the image. A few miles later, he saw a dimly lit rest stop and decided to pull over. He needed to splash cold water on his face and maybe stretch. The parking lot was empty except for a single pickup truck. Engine off, no driver in sight. Trevor walked into the restroom and stood at the sink. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. As he leaned over to splash his face, he heard something. The distinct sound of high heels tapping against the tiled floor. He looked up. The mirror was fogging slightly, even though the room was cold. Behind him in the reflection was a figure. Long black hair, pale dress. He spun around, no one. The door hadn't opened. He was alone. He grabbed his keys and bolted back to the car. As he approached the driver's side, he froze. There were muddy handprints on the back window. Small, thin prints. Too small for an adult. Too many to count. He jumped in, locked the doors, and sped off. The gas gauge blinked, nearly empty. But he didn't care. He needed to get back to civilization. 15 minutes later, as he crested a hill, his headlights caught another overpass. And there she was. The same woman, same spot, same pale dress. This time her head was tilted back, eyes visible, completely white. She raised one hand slowly and pointed directly at Trevor. He swerved, nearly hitting the guardrail, then floored it past the overpass, heart hammering in his chest. In the rearview mirror she remained, now walking to the edge of the bridge, still pointing. Trevor didn't stop again. He reached a truck stop an hour later and stumbled into the diner, visibly shaken. An older man behind the counter looked at him knowingly. "Let me guess," he said, "you saw her." Trevor stared at him. "You know about that thing?" The man nodded. "That stretch of road's cursed. They say it started after a woman jumped to her death there in 1963, lost her child in a car accident, never recovered, walked to the overpass one night and..." He trailed off, tapping the counter with his ring finger. "Thing is, she didn't die alone. Witnesses said she was holding a child when she jumped. But when they found the body, there was no child, just her." Trevor never took that route again. But sometimes when driving alone late at night, he finds himself instinctively checking the overpasses. And every so often, he swears he still sees her, waiting. Brandon and Louise had been best friends since high school, bonded by a mutual love for photography and roadside adventures. Every few months, they'd pick a new direction, pack their gear, and hit the road. This time, they were headed to a rumored ghost town in Utah called Pine Rock, supposedly abandoned in the 1970s, left untouched and preserved like a time capsule. It wasn't on any major maps, but they'd found old blog posts and a couple of blurry satellite images. Hidden between mountain ranges and accessible only by rough winding back roads, Pine Rock was a perfect mystery. The further they drove, the more unstable the GPS became. By late afternoon, they had no signal, and the road narrowed into dirt. They hadn't passed another car in over an hour. "Creepy," Louis said, peering out the window. "We're either gonna find something amazing or die trying." They reached the outskirts around sunset. A faded wooden sign, barely legible, read, "Pine Rock, Esters, 1874. The town stretched out ahead, dusty streets, wooden storefronts, an old church with broken stained glass. But it wasn't completely silent. Wind rustled through alleys, and they thought they heard footsteps. They started exploring, cameras out, shutters clicking. The town felt frozen in time, clothes still hung in windows, dishes on tables. It was eerie, but nothing felt dangerous, just forgotten. Until they found the journal. In the upstairs bedroom of a long-abandoned home, Brandon opened a drawer and pulled out a leather-bound diary. Its pages were brittle, but the handwriting was legible. The entries were dated June 1973. the final month anyone had reportedly lived in Pine Rock. One entry stood out. "It watches from the trees now. We hear it breathing. The town is emptying, but we're too afraid to leave. If you find this, don't stay past sundown." Luis laughed it off, but Brandon suddenly looked pale. He pointed out the window. Someone or something was standing at the edge of the forest just beyond the church. A tall figure, completely still, dressed in black, no face visible. They rushed outside, but by the time they reached the street, the figure was gone. "All right," Brandon said, voice tight, "let's pack up." They ran to the car and started driving, but something strange happened. The road looped. After 20 minutes, they were back at the same wooden Pine Rock sign. Luis looked behind them. The town was still there, unchanged. But now faint lights glowed in the windows, even though there was no electricity. They tried again, different direction, same result. Trapped. Desperate, they returned to the church. Maybe there was a clue. Inside, they found a massive painting on the ceiling, hidden under years of grime, depicting a monstrous black figure with long limbs, arms stretched across the entire town. Beneath it, a broken pulpit with something carved into the wood. The town is alive. Suddenly, the door slammed shut. Whispers began to echo around them, footsteps scraping. Then, a scream from outside. Luis opened the door and Brandon was gone. His camera lay in the dirt, still recording. The footage showed Brandon backing away, and something tall and shadowed lunging at him from behind. Luis ran into the woods. No one ever heard from him again. Months later, a hiker found Brandon's camera miles away, half buried in a creek. The footage stopped at the moment of impact. The screen went black, but the audio kept rolling. For 5 full minutes, it captured the sound of someone, or something, breathing, slowly and heavily. "The last thing on the recording," a soft voice, almost childlike, whispering. "Don't forget to come back, we're still waiting." Carla and Mason were 2 months into their cross-country honeymoon, a spontaneous off-the-map road trip from Virginia to California. They'd agreed to avoid big cities and take the old highways instead, the ones people forgot about after the interstates took over. One sweltering afternoon in New Mexico, their fuel gauge blinked red in the middle of nowhere. The map showed a town called Marrow Creek just 10 miles down the road. They hadn't heard of it, but they didn't have much choice. When they reached it, Marrow Creek looked strange, like a painting that had been left out in the rain. The gas station was straight out of the 1950s, pastel colors, chipped signage, and a spinning Coca-Cola thermometer stuck at 103 degrees F. The only employee was a middle-aged woman with perfectly styled hair and a too-wide smile. Her name tag read, Nancy. "We don't get many visitors anymore," she said, swiping a rag across the counter. "Pump's old, but it works." Mason stepped out to refuel while Carla went to use the restroom. She passed through a hallway behind the counter and noticed something odd, a long row of Polaroids on the wall. Each photo showed a different family, couple, or lone traveler, all standing in front of the same gas station, all smiling, all faded. In every photo, Nancy was there in the background, unchanged, same hairstyle, same uniform, same smile. Carla felt a chill and rushed into the bathroom. The lights buzzed overhead, and the water ran brown for a few seconds before clearing. When she emerged, the hallway was darker. The photos were gone. Only blank wall space remained. At the counter, Nancy still smiled. "You'll be staying the night, yes?" "No," Carla said, grabbing Mason's arm. "We're just getting gas." Nancy tilted her head. "That's not how this works." They didn't wait to hear more. Mason threw a 20 on the counter and they ran for the car. As they sped out of town, Carla looked back. There was no gas station, no town, only dust. And then came the smell. Strong, chemical, like gasoline leaking into the vents. Mason pulled over and opened the hood. Nothing. But in the back seat was a baby. A newborn. Silent. Wrapped in an old hospital blanket soaked in gasoline. Its eyes were wide, too wide, and completely black. They stared in horror. Then the baby opened its mouth and let out a sound that wasn't a cry. It was a hiss, low and mechanical, like a gas pump sputtering. Carla screamed. Mason backed away, but the car door slammed shut by itself. The windows fogged instantly. On the windshield, something began to write from the inside, invisible fingers dragging across the condensation. "You belong to Marrow Creek now." The engine died. The air reeked of gas, making them dizzy. Carla began to cough violently as the baby started laughing, a wet, gurgling sound that echoed in their skulls. Then, just as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. They were parked on the side of the highway, the sun just setting. No baby, no fog, just them in the car. But when they checked the back seat, the hospital blanket was still there, wet, smelling faintly of gasoline. Weeks later, Carla started waking up with her hands smelling of fuel. Mason began having dreams of a woman in a retro uniform, smiling at the foot of their bed. One morning, they found a new Polaroid on their doorstep. It showed them standing in front of the gas station, Nancy behind them, smiling. If you made it this far, thank you for spending your night with us. If these stories gave you chills, there's plenty more waiting. Don't forget to subscribe to NightFear Stories for new terrifying tales every single night. Sleep well, if you can.